I'm so glad to be able to continue this sermon about our walk into greatness, these degrees of greatness that our two theologians, Josiah and Joshua, talked to us about. We are continuing from the book of Joshua, Joshua the 6th chapter. Joshua the 6th chapter. We've been talking about greatness and how greatness is relative. And we are breaking up our affair with the average. We are no longer infatuated with the routine. Today, we want greatness. Joshua the 6th chapter, verses 1 through 5. Now, Jericho was securely shut up. Because of the children of Israel, none went out and none came in. And the Lord said unto Joshua, See, I have given Jericho into your hand, its king and its mighty men of valor. You shall march around the city, all you men of war. You shall go around the city once. This shall you do 6 days. And 7 priests shall bear 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark. But the 7th day you will march around the city 7 times, and the priests shall blow the trumpet. And it shall come to pass when they make a long blast with the ram's horn, that when you hear the sound of the people, that all the people shall shout with a great shout. Then the wall will fall down flat, and the people shall go up, every man straight before him. The grass withers, the flowers fade away, but the word of our God shall stand forever. You may be seated in the presence of the Lord. Today I want to talk about walking into promise. Walking into promise. These degrees of greatness. We have been studying this book of Joshua. I was watching the playoffs, not because I have a particular interest in them. This is a difficult time for many of us in Delvin. But I was going to need something to talk to you about when I see you in the hall, so I was watching. Deshaun Watson, a quarterback for Houston, said something yesterday. He sent all of his teammates a little card that said, let's be great, let's be great. In the interview last night, after the game, they were interviewing him, and the lady asked him what was going through his mind. He said that when he was playing, and he made a spectacular play. There is no denying the play that he made. And he said to her, he said, I gave them a card that said, let's be great. And the lady said, well, what were you thinking? He said, somebody had to be great today. I said, why not it be me? I mean, if you got to be something, why not be great? Why do you want to settle for average? I want to say to all of us that God is calling us to a higher level of ministry and a deeper level of commitment. And I really think God is saying to us, I'm calling you to be great. I'm not calling you to be perfect. Only Jesus can master that. But I'm calling you to not settle, to at least strive to be better. Children of Israel, we've studied. They've been marching. They've come now after crossing over the Jordan River, God rolling back the Jordan River. They come to a place called Gilgal. It is at Gilgal that the manna stops falling from heaven. It is at Gilgal that they are not in the promised land, but they're not in the wilderness anymore either. They've come out of Egypt. It is at Gilgal where they are poised and perched. It is at Gilgal where they are at a place of potential. Now, you're going to know I'm from the country when I tell you what Gilgal really is. Gilgal is a nearby point, where you're nearby where you ought to be, but not quite. It is at Gilgal where many of us camp out and stay because we love to say, I may not be what I ought to be, but thank God I ain't what I used to be. And God is saying, I didn't call you out of Egypt for you to stay in Gilgal. I have not called you to be perched and poised in potential. I've called you to walk in promise. And what God is saying is we've stayed here long enough saying we may not be what we ought to be. God is saying, why aren't you what you ought to be? And whatever excuse you have, I've not called you to Gilgal. I promised you a promised land. And don't get past where you were and not become what you can be. So in Joshua 6, it's his invitation from God to this place of great. Joshua 5, we found out on Tuesday night that was there that Joshua worshiped, where he saw this pre-incarnate theophany of Jesus as a man with a sword drawn. He prepares the place. For 40 years now, they have been in the wilderness. They are here. And in chapter 6, they get to the place of promise. And after 40 years of walking around, after spending all that time down in Egypt, God has promised them a place. And when they get to their place, they encounter a wall. You're going to walk into promise. The first thing I want to suggest to you is you got to deal with the problem. The first thing that chapter 6 says is they see a wall, not a regular wall. Biblical historians tell us that this wall is 12 feet high. It is 6 feet wide. It is a double wall. It is such a thick wall that in the second chapter of Joshua, people actually build homes upon the wall. What do you do when God has made you a promise, but you get there and your promise is in prison? How do you handle it when you see your wealthy place and somebody else is walking in it? What do you do when you can behold it, but you can't become it? How do you deal with the problem? First of all, let me suggest to you, this text says something interesting. The King James used this word, straitly shut up. It says that it was fixed so that nobody could come in and nobody could go out. And I need to tell you that the closer you get to where God is promising you your destiny, the harder the enemy is going to try to make you not go in. And let me tell you, before you quit on God, before you go post on Facebook how bad your situation is, let me tell you something about God. That when God told you to leave, he already knew about the wall being there. When God told you about your promise, he already knew about the wall. So if God already knew, if the wall is known, you ought not be tripping on God. It may have caught you by surprise, but God is not afforded the luxury of ignorance. God has to know that there is no yesterday or the day or tomorrow with God, that with God the future is just history waiting to happen. God already knew about the wall, and don't fall apart, because if God knew about the wall, he has prepared you to handle the wall. We keep acting like this stuff is brand new to God. This ain't God's first rodeo. He's seen your wall before, and don't you fall apart just because you have a wall. As a matter of fact, some people like to say, well, if it's this hard, God must not have told us. Anytime you find in Scripture when God sends somebody, the devil's job, he knows he can't stop it. So what he tries to do is he tries to make you so frustrated that you'll quit on God yourself. When he sees you're at the place of promise, he's going to do everything he can to try to make you stop. God knew that your wall was going to be there. I feel like preaching this morning. Well, let me tell you what God has done. Because God knew about your wall, God has already negated your wall. It's in the text. God has already, look at what God told him to do. God speaks in what I call a future prophetic tense. Here's what God says. God talks about something that's going to happen like it's already occurred. He says, watch what he says, I have already given you Jericho. Here it is. Now, he says, tomorrow you are going to fight, you have already won. Y'all, excuse me, I'm fighting a cold, and I got a little cold medicine. It might make me accidentally tell the truth up here. God is saying that the issue of you winning, it's not a question. You've already won. You just got to show up for the fight. Because what God says is you're going to win, but don't you get disqualified by staying in the locker room. Because if you don't at least show up to the ring, they can't raise your hand. Preach, Delvin, I am. So what God says is, I have already given you Jericho. What God says is, I don't need you to win it. I just need you to possess it. It is already yours. I don't need everybody, but just look like somebody in here has been wrestling with something, and you just want to say right here, it's already mine. I just got to go get it. It's already mine. I got to go get it. I've already taken care of the fight. You just show up. I've given you Jericho and its mighty men. You show up. So why are you in the corner crying about a fight you've already won? Now here is the shout in the text. What God says to us is that I knew about the wall. I've already negated the wall, but you needed the wall. Let me tell you why you needed the wall. Why did we need the wall there? Here it is. Here it is. You know, we borrow words, and we love to borrow buzzwords. And one of the buzzwords that Baptists have borrowed, we borrowed it from the Church of God in Christ. It's called breakthrough. That's all we talk about, child. I'm looking for my breakthrough. I want my breakthrough. I need my breakthrough, financial breakthrough, my spiritual breakthrough. If God said the reason I let you have a wall is if I didn't put the wall there, you would have had a walk-in. I gave you the wall so you could have something to break through. That was a shout right there. I must have run. What God said is you needed the wall for a breakthrough. And nobody can shout about a walk-in. But when I gave you the wall and I broke through the wall, you could shout about your breakthrough, so that when somebody asks you, how did you feel when you come out the wilderness? Child, I felt like shouting because I had a breakthrough. My friend Delvin tells a story about when he broke his wrist. He grew up in Hearn, and in Hearn we only had a general practitioner. He went to the general practitioner, and Delvin had broke his wrist, and the general practitioner said he had only seen that break one other time in his whole practice. So he wrapped Delvin's arm up, and Delvin went to a specialist in Waco. The specialist x-rayed Delvin's wrist, came in the room, pulled his wrist one time, jammed it in, wrapped it up, and said, come see me in 6 months. What was major to a general practitioner was routine to a specialist. Have you any rivers that seem uncrossable? Have you any mountains that you cannot tunnel through? God specializes in things that seem impossible, and he can do what no other power. There is the problem, but then he gives them a plan. It's in the text. I'm not making it up. He gives them a plan. Well, what is the plan? He said, here's what I want you to do. I want you to walk around. He said, now have the mighty men of war to meet you. He said, I want you to walk around the city 7 days. And 6 days, one time, don't say anything. On the 7th day, march around 7 times. Don't say anything until the 7th time. On the 7th time, when the trumpet is blown, shout with a great shout. Now here it is. The challenge is that the adversary is on the wall, but our activity is on the ground. Maybe God is telling us in this season of prayer that if we want to break strongholds up here, we got to learn to be on our knees down here. I'm going to shout myself, and I ain't playing. I ain't playing. I intend to shout before this is over. Because what it says is, now this plan doesn't make sense to anybody else. Y'all know, he got up here saying, walk around, don't say nothing 7 times. Okay. That's day 1. Day 2, walk around, don't say nothing. We're going to surprise them. Now, around about that 4th day, y'all know, Pastor, I can't make it, but I'm going to be praying for you. You know my heart is there with you. My spirit is there with you. Now, those are my calls. Your email would look like something. Your pastor ain't going to make no fool out of me out there with them. But you see, here's what you got to understand about God, is that God designs the plan. It is designed by the Lord, it is directed by the leader, and it is done by the laity. God doesn't have to clear it with anybody. He gives instructions. And God says, you don't have to do it my way, but you'll never have my results if you don't do it my way. And everybody has their plan. Because here is what God knows. God knows just how much to shift the sand with every foot that you take. So what God says to us is we've got to learn how to follow his plan in order to get his results. God says to us, I know it doesn't make sense to you, but you've got to understand that I'm looking at a bigger picture. And what God says is, I promise you, if you do it my way, it's going to work out. I know sometimes you don't understand. I know sometimes it doesn't make sense. That's why I gave you a leader. When you can't see it, see him, because his job is to follow me. How many times do we do things where we can't see the end result? I'm getting ready to leave home. I'm going out of town riding. I'm watching Channel 5 News. I used to watch Channel 11, but they didn't have enough diversity in the morning, so I switched. Amen. I like to see people on TV that look. Well, anyway, a young lady comes on and says there's traffic on 35. If you take 35 out of Lewisville, there's a wreck. Now, y'all, that's my car. I pay for my own gas. I'm going to I pay my own note. I pay my own insurance. When the oil gets changed, I pay for my. She doesn't do anything. But this young girl tells me there's trouble, and I take the tollway instead of going down 35. And the reason I do isn't because she's smarter, not because she's more spiritual, not because she knows more about cars, not even because she pays for my car. The reason I do it is she has access to some insight I don't have. She has the advantage of elevated intelligence. She gets to see somebody in a helicopter who can see stuff down the road that I can't see. Now, if I want to make my journey hard, I can go ahead and do it my way, or I can trust that she's going to lead me the right way. All I'm trying to tell you is I'm not smarter than anybody. I'm not more spiritual than anybody, but I have access to elevated intelligence. And God says he'd give me direction, and you can do it your way, but it's some wrecks along the way. This text says a word about the problem. This text says a word about the plan, but this text says a word about patience. I'm right here in the text. He said, now why would he have them to walk in silence? Why would he have them to walk and not say anything? Can I tell you the reason I believe that he has them to walk in silence? It's because the last time they got ready to go to the promised land, they talked themselves out. The last time they were there 40 years ago, somebody said we couldn't do it. And that's why you got to be careful the voices that you listen to when you get ready to walk into your promise. Because there are some voices who hadn't consulted with God. That's why you got to be careful who you listen to. You got to be careful who you take advice from. All you got to do is check their result. Because have you ever noticed how folk who never do anything can always tell you how to get something done? I ain't after nobody, but you ever notice how many single people can tell you how to keep a man or how many folk you know ain't running nothing at home, but they gonna tell you how to run? Y'all ain't gonna help me, y'all. How many folk ain't got nothing gonna tell you how to get something and tell you? No, you got to be careful who you let talk to you, because if you're not careful, there are people who will talk you out of promise and will have you walking in circles. And you see, the reality is it's easier for them to talk you down than to step up their game. And you're trying to listen. Oh my God. But listen to what he says. He says to them, not only is there silence in their walking, but he gives them a season of waiting. He says to us to make another lap. God moves slowly and swiftly at the same time. Because you can be praying to God for something for 30 years. and then overnight he'll make it happen and you won't even know. Why do y'all think God makes them walk 7 days and 7 times? It is because we learn to appreciate in silence that just because we don't see motion doesn't mean that God isn't working. That just because we can't see it doesn't, and here it is, I'm talking to somebody, you are ready to quit. Let me tell you something about what the devil knows. He knows this even if we don't know it, y'all. He can see into your future, and the devil knows he can't stop you from getting what God has. But if he can frustrate you, he's already looked in your future, and he knows on day 7 that wall is coming down and you got to shout. So he's going to try to frustrate you to make you quit on day 4 or 5. But I stopped by here to tell you to make you another lap. I'm talking to somebody who's been praying to God. You've been praying for that child, and it looks like it's worse instead of better. All you got to do is say, I'm going to make me another lap because I got a day 7 on the way. I'm talking to somebody, that job looks like it's pure hell and doesn't look like you're going to make it. I stopped by to tell you to make you another lap. I'm talking to somebody, you've been praying over your relationship. It doesn't look like it's getting any better, but just because you can't see it doesn't mean that God isn't working. Make you another lap. Somebody dealing with a sickness, you don't feel like it's getting any better, but God got a breakthrough on day 7. Make you another lap. Don't you quit. Make you another lap. Don't you quit on God. God has a shout in your future. The very devil in hell is afraid because he knows if you'll get to the end, that wall got to come down. Make you another lap. I don't know who I'm talking to, but I stop by to tell you, encourage your soul and let us journey on. Though the night is dark and I am far from home, thanks be to God, the morning light appears, the storm is passing over. Hallelujah. That's all I want to tell you. Make you another lap. Don't you quit. First flight I ever took, I took from Austin to Houston. I was going to meet Dr. M.L. Price. I was a freshman in college, University of Texas. I went down to see Dr. Price, and when we got there, it was foggy, and the pilot came over and said, there's fog on the air in Houston. He says, we're going to be in a holding pattern. He had us in a holding pattern. Now, this is my first flight. I'm from Hearn. I'm scared, and we just circling. But he says, we're going to stay up here until it's safe to land. They were clearing things out. They were getting things ready below so that when I got there, everything would be all right. That's all I'm trying to tell you. Just because God has you in a holding pattern, don't think he's forgotten your destination. He's just getting the stuff ready. Make you another lap. You've been kind. Let me conclude by telling you what you ought to do in the place of promise to secure that victory. He says a word about the problem, says a word about the plan, says a word about patience, but he concludes with a word about praise. He says on the 7th day, they're going to blow the shofar, that horn. And he says when they shout, to shout with a great shout. He doesn't tell them what to shout. He doesn't tell them how to shout. He just says on that 7th day, shout with a great shout. Now, I used to be leery of people who could shout at a moment's notice. Matter of fact, I used to be kind of skeptical of people who just shout about everything. I know I'm not the only one. Any of y'all know people, you say the weather is 70, woo, 70. You just say ain't nobody that happy, but maybe they are. Maybe it's not them. Maybe it's us. What do you just shout about at a moment's notice? Well, I'll tell you. Let me say that we ought to shout to commemorate our past. Because if Beverly Crawford is right, if the Lord never does anything else, he's already done enough. 40 years, they didn't have to go to Walmart to buy clothes because their clothes didn't wear out. 40 years, God fed them in the wilderness. God always made sure in the desert that 2 million people had enough water. 40 years. They had won battles and they had had no formal military training. Some fights they won, they didn't even have to fight. God just fought for them. All they had to do was show up. And it may be that today, a good time to shout, if you need a reason to shout, is just looking back over the year that has passed. You remember how frightened you were when you got that first diagnosis, but look at you now, you're still standing. You can shout about your past. How many times last year did it look like you would lose everything you had just in your past, but God has taken care of you? How many of us had children get in trouble, but the Lord watched over them? I'm just going to shout about what he's done in the past. How many times did you go to bed at night ready to throw in the towel, only to say when you woke up in the morning, God made it all right? Just those of us who had to stand by sick loved ones or dead loved ones, and we didn't think we'd keep on keeping on, but the Lord made a way. How many times did God bless us over and above what we thought? You ought to shout just to commemorate your past. But if you don't want to shout about the past, you ought to shout to celebrate the present. Just the fact that you are here today is a blessing. I'm clothed and in my right mind. I've got a reasonable portion of health and strength. I've got the activities of my limb. I just want to thank him for right now. I've got some food at the house, got a little money in my pocket, got some car keys. I want to thank him for right now. I've got a sense of mind. I know who I am. I know who my children are. I want to thank him for right now. I've got a roof over my head. I got shoes on my feet. Kind of thank him for right now. I had enough sense this morning to come to church. I want to thank him for right now. But my friends, I want to commemorate my past. I want to celebrate my present, but I want to anticipate my future. I want to shout for what God is about to do. He said shout because the wall is up, but it's about to come down. Every step that I make means that the wall is coming down. I might be sick, but my healing is on the way. I might be broke, but I got some money coming. I might be sad, but joy is coming. I'm shouting about what he's about to do. I'm going to my seat, y'all. I'm going to my seat, y'all. I got to quit right here, y'all. I got to quit right here, but let me tell you how I feel right now. For 6 days, they couldn't say anything. They had to be quiet, but on day 7, they had to shout. Now watch what happens when they shout. He says, when you shout, the wall gonna come down. And when the wall comes down, you walk straight. That means you gonna walk on what you've been walking around. It's under my feet. Depression under my feet. Trouble under my feet. Sadness under my feet. And I got to tell y'all, I discovered something about problems. That problems are just like stains. If you want a tough one out, you got to shout it out. Anybody here came to shout your way through? Anybody here want to shout your way through? It's day 7. It's shouting time. I dare you to shout like it's already done. I dare you to shout like it's already done. I dare you to shout. Hallelujah. 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 I feel the ground shifting. Hallelujah. I feel the wall coming down. Hallelujah. Anybody here been asking God for it? Today you ought to shout like it's already done. Now, I'm going to do an invitation now. I don't know who I'm talking to, but somebody listening to me right now, you've been waiting to walk in your promise. You've been asking God for it. You've dared to believe that God is going to do it. You've gone through the long night not knowing what the promise of tomorrow is going to bring. But today you believe that God is going to work that thing out in your favor. I want you to come stand with me around the altar. I want you to come join me around the altar. You've been praying to God for your breakthrough, and you believe that it's happening right now.